Welcome to the Organized Investor PodCLASS with Jerry Goodman and Megan Hubbard from Tennessee Wealth Management. Think of these pod classes as a college of knowledge, and the curriculum is an inside look at how we work with our clients to organize their investments, their retirement, and their affairs. Our process is certainly not the only approach, but it has served our clients well. Listening may materially improve your life as well, but for that to happen, it also takes an open mind, an interest to learn, and your trust in what we're sharing. We focus only on what is relevant, and will explain things several times in different ways over multiple classes to ensure you understand their importance. We suggest you subscribe so you'll receive reminders about the next class. And with the tools and information on our website, theorganizedinvestor.com, you can start getting organized right now.
Welcome back, students, to what is our 20th PodCLASS. We're almost old enough to drink.
Yes.
And the 14th in a series on the subject of organizing your investments. Our recent binge watching of Boston Legal triggered us to change our format to mimic what is referred to as the discovery process that is conducted before a legal proceeding. So after taking a recess in the last PodCLASS, we'll continue our deposition of Jerry Goodman on the subject of organizing someone's investments and the idea of materially improving their long-term financial future. Now, as PodCLASS listeners, your role is to listen closely and decide if comments and evidence in these proceedings is truthful, compelling, and believable. So again, you're the jury. I'm still Megan Hubbard, along with my dad, who is still Jerry Goodman, and whoever you still are, or whoever you used to be, we're glad you're able to join us. I'm a former first grade teacher at Christian Academy of Knoxville, and Dad's a former Boy Scout in Troop 11 of Knoxville. I questioned his Boy Scout membership the other day, so I guess he felt like he needed to make sure that I knew his troop number.
Our home location was First Baptist Church downtown. That's where we used to hang out and do our Boy Scout stuff.
I can only imagine you as a Boy Scout. I'm sure that was like your prime days.
That's where I came up with my do a good deed daily kind of concept, where I'd have to squeeze one in every day. So I usually try to start early, get it out of the way.
Well, that's good. Well, I've been a recipient of some of those, so I appreciate your motto there and still living that Boy Scout motto out in your life. How many years later? We won't say that because then you'll tell your age. But anyways, I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. So for our discovery process, I have the role of the question asker. That's 7. You're listening.
Good job.
Been listening. You know what we're talking about there. Dad is a certified financial planner. So for this discovery process, he'll be what is referred to as the deponent, also known as the question answerer. That was 7.
Okay,
so you know, I counted on my fingers. So hear ye, court is still not in session, so you still don't need to rise, and we'll begin deposing our deponent. The matter before...
Or degenerate, whichever it may be.
We can call you that too, if you prefer that. But anyways, the matter before the PodCLASS includes organizing your investments. And is it possible to materially improve one's long-term financial future? So, Mr. Dad, if that really is still your name, you need to remember that you're still under oath from the deposition that started back in PodCLASS number 16. And then we had it in 17 and then 18. And here we are, 19 and now 20.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm still going to tell the whole truth, still nothing but the truth, with the exception of maybe a joke or two, if I can think of one and kind of squeeze it in an appropriate spot. That's my big plan here.
Oh, you squeezing something in an appropriate spot has never been something you've worried about before. Why are we?
Well, I mean, it's just squeezing it. It potentially has to be funny too, worth repeating from a comical standpoint or a humor standpoint.
You also have never let that stop you telling a joke that you think is funny that really isn't. But
it's true. But it makes me feel good to try to share the humor. That's
okay.
It's like it's a good deed a day and a good joke a day. That's what I live by.
Well, that's a pretty good motto, I guess. Well, Mr. Dad, this deposition started due to the accusation that you've been repeating yourself in these PodCLASSes and that you even plan to continue to repeat yourself in future ones. So remind this PodCLASS, how do you plead?
I'm guilty of repeating important information, and as you've heard before, I'm going to throw myself on the mercy of the PodCLASS. And yes, I plan to continue to repeat this for the benefit of our many PodCLASS listeners. That's why we're doing
Now,
this.
calm down. This isn't a criminal proceeding, at least not yet. You're getting a little heated.
Well, I just get kind of concerned. I don't like the man coming down on me, as they say.
Now, for someone who is just joining this deposition, you explain that dividend growth is a strategy of investing in well-managed companies with a history of raising their dividends each year.
Well said. That is absolutely correct.
And you also gave evidence that the strategy has been very successful. So is this still your position?
Yes, it is. And as long as we're going through all of these little reminders, let's not forget to remind to our listeners, just what the evidence is and just how good the performance has been. Okay.
Fair enough. So you have 5 exhibits so far, and not like exhibits at the zoo, but like 5 pieces of documentation.
Right.
So we're going to try to keep this brief. So in your own words, what was Exhibit A?
Exhibit A, it is a summary of the research list from Wells Fargo, which is the name of it is called Diversified Stock Income Plan. And with a big name like that, you'd understand why we call it DSIP, D-S-I-P, DSIP for kind of its short abbreviated name, its nickname.
And this is a research list that relates to this dividend growth strategy, right?
It is. And the performance has been 12% a year going back 30 years when it began, I think, November of 1993, and which is much better than the 9.6% return of the S&P 500 over the same time period. Much better.
And isn't Exhibit B also related to a dividend growth strategy?
It also is. It is a Ned Davis research summary that, again, also shows the outperformance of this dividend growth strategy and is over an even longer period of time than 30 years.
And let the record show that Exhibits A and B are both on the investments page of the website, theorganizedinvestor.com. And since we're going in alphabetical order here, which I love, anything that's in an order, I just adore, remind us about Exhibit C.
Exhibit C, this basically is referring back to PodCLASSes 11 and 12. I mean, this is number 20, but in 11 and 12, we went through and explained that we have 84 advisory accounts that we've managed for at least a 5-year period that, again, also focuses on the same dividend growth strategy.
So please tell the listeners about that performance.
Well, so as of the end of January 2024, the average net rate of return after any kind of fees or expenses or cost was 14.06% per year for those 5 years.
And what does a 14.06% return per year really mean?
Well, to start off with, it means our advisory clients have made a lot of money. And if you extrapolate that out over, say, that 14% return over a 5-year period, it's equivalent to an increase in value of 92%.
So it didn't double in value, but it was close.
It was really close.
Okay. And PodCLASS listeners should do what with this information?
Well, to start with, they can simply compare what their own performance has been, say, over the last 5 years, and if it's less than 14% a year, or maybe it didn't even come close to doubling in value, whatever it is, maybe they have some room for improvement.
But what if someone doesn't know what their performance has been or even what they own?
Well, maybe they need to either find out or we can help them find out, if they'd like us to help us go through and review their statements with them. Now, Exhibit D, that's also on our website. It's under the name Fear of Missing Out, or FOMO, which is kind of the common abbreviation for that. And that FOMO comment on our website, that summary, if you will, it discusses the fear of missing out on the next Apple or Tesla, Nvidia, or whatever the hot stock is that everybody thinks is going to make them a ton of money. Exhibit E is an Edward. That was a summary referred to. It's called the 10 Things You Need to Know About Bear Markets. And in episode 18 and 19, we talked about how we've been able to benefit from what we've just termed it or named it, what are called bargain opportunities in the market. Like one of them was COVID in 2020. The other was a banking crisis of 2023.
So let's keep moving here. In PodCLASS number 16, we actually shared the fact that the term harping on dates back to the 1500s, and it's just a shorter version of harp on the same string, which means playing the same note over and 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 over again. Okay.
Right. And you're right. And since you brought it up again, I have been harping on this dividend growth strategy for many moons, many episodes, and I plan to continue to do so. That's my big grand plan here.
So share with us why dividend growth is so important.
Well, I'd say there's a zillion reasons, but let's just leave it at a lot. And here's two of the most important ones. First, this dividend growth strategy. This is the most consistently profitable investment strategy I've ever found. Okay, I've done this for over 40 something years, and just look at the exhibits that we posted, like A and B, for example. Next, after I initially learned about this dividend growth strategy, it took little bitty me about 6 months to kind of realize and appreciate just how beneficial this can be for virtually any investor, regardless of their age or regardless of their situation.
So, in other words, you really like the approach, but it took a while to sink in.
It did. And if you go back to 2007, a friend in the office explained this strategy to me and the DSIP list in particular. And fortunately, he pestered me about this until I finally realized just how really good this was. It took a while.
Well, okay. So, since someone had to harp on you, you're now harping on the podcast listeners?
It only seems fair, and look at it like this. If we don't keep harping on this, and kind of beat it into somebody's head, if you want to use that as an expression, it's not going to get somebody's attention. And I promise you, a year from now, they're still going to be invested in the same portfolio with the same mediocre performance and the same mutual funds that are over diversified with big expenses they probably have right now. That's what can happen if they don't pay attention. And as you would say, Megan, if they don't turn their ears on.
Well, yes, it works for first graders, it works for adults.
It does.
Now, just for the record, exactly who are you trying to harp on?
Well, we've said this several times, and we're going to harp on who we're harping on. First one is anybody that's not yet a client who we think might benefit from some of our words of wisdom. The other group may sound a little odd, but it is the families of our current clients. Whoever's dealing with us right now, could be the brother, sister, parents, but usually it's going to be the children of our current clients.
So, how is all of this information, going to help the family of your clients?
Well, to start with, the family will probably the family itself is probably going to inherit these accounts. Okay. And it would be nice if they had some understanding of how we've been helping their clients with all this. So they have some understanding of how we're managing their future inheritance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And next, their family may actually benefit personally from all of this, as in like right now and not 20 years down the road.
So this can help them as well as anyone else, is what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah. And their parents, they don't have to explain this because they can basically listen to the PodCLASS and we're explaining it for them, through these episodes.
So in your testimony, you're harping on the strategy you're calling the dividend growth, but that may not be self-explanatory for the listeners. So can you provide some more insight to this PodCLASS?
Sure. And we've said this several times, in different episodes, that dividend growth basically focuses on companies with a history of growing their dividends. Okay. Let's say raising their dividends over time. Now, just to be clear about this, we're not talking about the companies that are paying the highest mathematical dividend yield at some moment in time. We're referring to the companies that are increasing those dividends at the fastest rate. That's really where the appeal to this is.
So most people wouldn't think a company that's increasing their dividends every year would be, that important.
You're right. And these aren't the most exciting investments on the planet, okay? But a company that is capable of increasing their dividends means they're very profitable. They're well managed, which is why they're so attractive to investors. That's why it's not because of the dividends, it's because of what the underlying management of the company is and the success of that company. And it's all indicated by what's happening with that dividend. So the dividend is important, but the fact that it's increasing it year after year is why they've been appreciating so much in value. They're just loved by their shareholders.
Okay, so can you give us the names of a few companies which, may help the PodCLASS understand who you're referring to?
Well, since you asked, on the investments page of the website, we have Exhibit F, as in Frank. It's titled Consecutive Dividend History of the DSIP List. Okay, that's a catchy little name, isn't it? And as the name implies, it outlines the, let's call it the uninterrupted dividend increases for 13 companies on that DSIP list. So, Megan, you're better to listen to than me. How about you go through the list of companies for us? Just do it one at a time and tell us, say, the company name, the number of consecutive years that company has increased its dividend, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Now don't mess this up.
Okay, no pressure. Thanks.
Yep.
All right, so here we go. We have McDonald's. Everybody loves McDonald's salty fries. 46 consecutive years of dividend increases. There's automatic data processing. That sounds kind of boring. 47 years. Aflac. I'll just wait for Dad to do his
Aflac.
noise. Okay, there we go. He had to get it out of his system. That's 40 years. Johnson and Johnson. Those are all the products that we have at our house, like Band-Aids and face wash and all those sorts of things. 60 years. It's a long time. Honeywell. That's 12 years. Cisco Systems, 11. Colgate Palm Olive, 60. Lowe's Home Improvement, 61. I didn't even realize Lowe's had been around 61 years. Home Depot, 13. Emerson Electric, 66. Granger, 51. Clorox, 46. And Costco, 1.
Yeah, Costco is an interesting situation, and you would expect it to be more than a year. But here's the real kicker on Costco. The why it's only about 1 year is because recently, a year or two back, it paid this rather nice, large special dividend. And basically, once they did that, it was like a lot of money, per shareholder. Then they went back to the regular dividend amount. So it kind of screwed up their consecutive increase number. But still, the shareholders are super happy. And a couple of these other companies, they actually froze their dividend back in the great financial crisis around 2008, like Home Depot, for example. They kept paying it, but they just didn't increase it. And as you might expect, it was kind of a tough time. So, at that point in time, they began paying, and Cisco actually didn't start paying a dividend, I think, until around 2010 or so. So it's an interesting list, and most people will recognize most of those companies, I think.
Hopefully you're enjoying this Organized Investor PodCLASS with Megan Hubbard, the Dean of our College of Knowledge, and Jerry Goodman, her CFP dad. Check out our class notes to find out how to reach us, and subscribe to our PodCLASSes to get started.
Yeah, I would think the PodCLASS listeners would recognize most every one of those companies. You've probably either purchased an item from a store or a restaurant off that list, or maybe even have have a product in your home that's produced by one of those companies.
So those 13 companies that Megan just read off of the DSIP list, that list will usually include about 70 or 80 companies at any point in time. I mean, sometimes they'll be added, sometimes they'll drop off the list based on what's going on with them. And DSIP, which again, it's Exhibit A on our website, it's a great example of a dividend growth strategy because just look at its track record. It's 12% a year going back 30 years. We've said this many times. It goes all the way back to November 1993.
So it's easy to see why you've been harping on the dividend growth strategy, but please share with the PodCLASS how this can improve someone's long-term financial future.
Well, we've also harped on the fact that our goal for say in organizing someone's investments, we started off with this a long time ago. We'd say, look, our goal just as a base starting point is to improve someone's overall performance by 2% a year. Okay. So for someone with $1 million portfolio, a 2% improvement, not just what you've been getting, but a 2% improvement above what they had been getting, that's equivalent to $20,000 per year. Now, if you look at that over a 20-year period, that's $400,000 if you take the next $20,000 times a 20-year period.
Okay. So is that still a valid example though?
Yeah. It's nothing but just pure simple math. And previously we would have explained this in earlier PodCLASSes. We were explaining it this way. We would say, well, what if you saved 0.25% on your advisory fees? How much would that help? And what if you saved another 0.75% by getting rid of some of the mutual fund costs because you own, say, mutual funds in some sort of advisory account? And would say, and what if you improved your actual investment performance on those investments by 1% a year by being more selective with your investment choices? So it'd be those three things. That's how we started off in explaining this many episodes ago. And
those three what if scenarios, they total 2%.
Right. And so that's where you could take 2% times $1 million. And that was kind of our base case explanations for this. So what if you could improve your overall performance by 2% a year from, again, the lower fees, cost, and improve the performance? And based upon the value of your investments, how much would your long-term benefit be? I mean, starting off per year, but you could extrapolate that out on an annual kind of savings for you.
I'm just saying that's a lot of what ifing.
Well, it is. So we decided to explain this from 180 degrees the other direction, which we think is simpler, which is why we took the time to go through and compile the historical rates of return for every advisory account that we manage. Okay. We started doing this in PodCLASSes number 11 and 12. That's where we explained all of that.
And that's the 14% net rate of return you've mentioned for, that 5-year period, right?
It is. And that it's 14.06%. That is a net return, which already reflects the fact that our fees are probably lower. Our advisory fees are probably lower than what someone may be paying. It reflects the fact that we try to avoid we do avoid mutual funds, which could reduce the cost and actually improve the performance. It already reflects the fact that we're much more selective with our investment choices, and we focus on individual stocks that have a great track record because they raise their dividends. And again, this is where that's why we get some of these exceptional returns for these types of stocks.
So can you relate that 14% 5-year net rate of return to improving someone's long-term financial future?
Sure. I mean, if you assume someone has $1 million, it's invested, say, over a 5-year period, and say you made a 14% return per year. Now, to make this a little simple, let's just ignore income taxes just for the moment and make this not quite so complicated. What would it be worth? So with compounding $1 million, let's say it's grown 92%, it would now be worth, instead of $1 million, it'd be worth $1,925,000. I'm just doing simple math on this.
So you're saying that increasing a $1 million portfolio to 1.9 million in 5 years is a material improvement, right?
I would think most people would say yes. Now, if you took the same example and assumed a net rate of return of only, let's just say 7%, okay, instead of 14, the ending value would be $525,000 less. It's a big difference.
Well, that is a big difference just by, changing the rate of return.
Well, exactly. And that's why our approach is to not only try to minimize the fees and minimize the expenses, but to be more selective with the investments, which may materially improve someone's long-term financial future. So, and all we're talking about here is a 2% increase or improvement from whatever else that they're currently doing.
So remind this PodCLASS about your earlier comments when you compared a portfolio to a lottery ticket.
Great example. The lottery ticket, it's going to be what I'm going to call it the perfect metaphor. Because, I mean, if you don't check to see if you have a lottery ticket, if you don't check the ticket to see if you have a winning number, you won't know if you won. I mean, you got to go take a look. No one's going to call up and say, hey, you just won. You've got to go check.
And let the record show that a lottery ticket that is not claimed within like a certain period of time, that prize is actually forfeited.
And I think that's the way it is in every state. I mean, in January of 2024, there was a $36 million lottery ticket that basically nobody claimed. It went back to the state and the education pool and some other places. It didn't go to the person that bought the ticket. Now, this is the same thing. If you don't check to see if your portfolio has, let's say, the potential for improvement, you also don't know, and you may miss out on a significant benefit by, what could possibly be possible, but may be possible with your portfolio.
So, what are the odds that someone's portfolio has that potential for a 2% improvement?
I can't answer that because everybody's different, but I'll say this, it's a lot better than 1 in 302 million, like the lottery ticket is, okay?
So and you're saying there's a chance. There is a chance.
There is a big chance compared to the lottery ticket. Now, in terms of your portfolio, when it comes to what are the odds of it being better, the very blunt answer is it doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't make any difference about what you already own.
Well, okay, why not? Why doesn't it matter? And remember, you're under oath here. Tell the truth.
I still got my hand on the Gideon Bible. If it doesn't matter about the odds because what we're talking about here is a portfolio of investments that you already own, okay? If someone gave you a lottery ticket, so it's free, would you check to see if you won? Well, you probably would. For your portfolio, you have no downside to a little bit of investigating and maybe make a few comparisons, assuming that you're willing to spend a little bit of time to do that. I mean, it's not going to happen on your own. You're going to have to devote a little bit of time to find out.
So obviously the person in Florida, they already had the lottery ticket. It was up to them to find out if it had the winning numbers, and they didn't. And now it's too late. That's really sad.
Well, I'm sure they'd be real happy if they realized what had happened. And assuming someone has some sort of an investment portfolio. It's really up to them to find out if the investments, if they have a winning number that might materially improve their financial future. It's not that time consuming. And I would say, I mean, if you really want to know what's the percentage, I would say about half of everybody that we meet, half of them is going to have some portion of their portfolio that can be significantly improved. About half of everybody we meet.
So wait, to clarify this for the podcast, did you really just say half?
Yes. Now, when I talk about the half of these people, I'm not saying that everything in their portfolio can have significant improvement, but there'll be some part of it for half of who we talk to that can have some portion of those investments that can significantly be improved.
But unlike a lottery ticket, you can't check the TV or the internet to see if your portfolio has the winning numbers, right?
Well, that'd be kind of scary if you could go online and kind of see what your investments are and everybody else could see it. But no, it simply said, if you don't check, I mean, you literally can be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table. And I've seen example after example of people who show us things and go, wow, here's what you could do to fix this. Now, in our example of someone, let's say, with $1 million portfolio, when I say they may be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table, I mean literally, and I'm talking literally about that, and I'm saying this annually, okay? It's a recurring benefit this year, next year, so on. This isn't a one-time kind of benefit. It's an every year going forward kind of benefit.
So how do you check? How do you know if there's any room for improvement?
Well, okay, a couple of things. You can always call your financial advisor, which, is probably the last thing someone's going to want to do, because the financial advisor is probably the person who set up your portfolio in the first place. You could ask a friend. I mean, if you don't mind them knowing your business, I mean, that's another option.
I don't think I'd ask a friend. That's
well,
just me.
Well, some people might, but if you could try to find out on your own, which is great. You could try to find out on your own, and we're happy to help you along the way if you want to. I mean, we're here to help you. We don't charge anything to do this, but you do have to make a commitment to get us to help you if that's the option you want to take.
So I think you just answered this question, but just to be clear here, tell the PodCLASS how much it actually costs for you to help.
This is the easiest question of the day. There is no cost, okay? There's no obligation or really anything else, except you have to be willing to spend a little bit of time and share your information with us, okay? We have to see the X-ray, which is your statements. We have to have something to look at to come back and say, this is what you're doing. This is what we see. This is what we might suggest you do to make changes. And this would probably be, in our guess, what the benefit might be.
So on the subject of you harping on other things, you did spend a lot of time on estate planning quite a few episodes ago, quite a few PodCLASSes ago.
Excellent memory. That's back in the good old days. Those were actually episodes 4, 5, and 6. And we talked about organizing your affairs, which wasn't dealing with extramarital affairs. It were dealing with kind of estate planning things. But we talked about how we can save you $1,000, give or take a little bit, by you helping you work with a local estate planning attorney for a flat fee.
And those will be a good start for listeners to go to and listen.
4, 5, and 6 is a great place to start. However, I would also say that if you're going to just listen to one of them, okay, and if you have any inclination to want to use a revocable living trust, for someone, let's say in Tennessee, or if you've already got a revocable living trust, let me encourage you to sit down and take a listen to PodCLASS number 6, okay? We're going to explain to you in that PodCLASS exactly things that a Tennessee resident, for example, you've never heard before. And it's not going to change your life, but it'll change your perspective and your outlook on revocable living trusts and what people have told you about them, and some of the miscommunication and the misrepresentation, I will call it that you're going to hear. I promise you're going to hear some things that you've never heard before.
Okay, so with that being said, is there anything else we need to cover before we take a recess for the day?
Hey, we can talk about my very favorite thing of all for each podcast. It is that our rate of return we shared for informational purposes only, and that past performance is no guarantee of future results.
Okay, well, you've said that before.
I did. And, and it's not any more interesting than the first time, was it?
No,
it wasn't. It gets worse. I'm trying to make this as entertaining as I can. And let me say, the return for each of these client accounts, they can vary based upon the client's individual circumstances, such as when they started the account, what their objectives were, those sorts of fun things too.
Next time you should try to say it backwards or do something like that. say
Okay.
it while you're drinking water or something.
Yep, it's true. I was counting backwards from 100 by 7. That's kind of fun too.
Ugh.
Anyway,
Anyway,
let me
any
also
other
say,
information?
well, let me just say the rates of return for these advisory accounts that we compiled, these are from a month-end performance report for each of these 190 accounts respectively. So this was kind of a production to do this. And it's way too much information, to put on the website that's going to be in any sort of understandable format. Okay. It's just too much info.
Well, we all appreciate you not going through all 190 accounts.
Well, it would be it'd be pretty awful for everybody involved. But in addition to covering this here, we're also happy to share either face to face or on a Zoom call, some of this information that we've got that kind of verifies or documents this if somebody wants to see it.
So what you're saying is you have a lot of boring documentation to back up these statistics, and you're happy to cover it with anybody brave enough to do so.
Couldn't say it better myself.
All right. Well, in our next podcast, we'll continue our discovery process and the deposition of Jerry Goodman on the subject of improving someone's long-term financial future. Please feel free to contact us with any questions you may have. Also, be sure to follow us on social media like YouTube, LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, which still annoys me that they changed their name, and save us to your favorite PodCLASS player to receive reminders of future episodes. We have more to share, which means you have more to learn. So join us next time. As always, thanks for listening. And this PodCLASS is dismissed, recessed, and adjourned. Until next time.
Aflac.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the organized investor or TN Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and are not intended as investment advice or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning or before making any investment decision. And please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The organized investor cannot accept trade or account instructions on or through this platform. Please contact us directly at contactus@tnwealthmanagement.com or 865-415-2060 to place a trade or for trade or account related questions. Brokerage and advisory services are provided by TN Wealth Management through Prospera Financial Services Inc., member FINRA SIPC. The organized investor is a brand name operated by TN Wealth Management for educational platform purposes.